The Execution of Curtis Windom. On an August afternoon in 2025, a group of people guided by prison staff walk through the halls of the Florida State Prison near Stark. This tour will take them to the room located across from the execution room. They share the same walls and share a window, until now covered to prevent viewing through. It is a Thursday, August 28th. The clock on the wall shows 6 p.m. In this room are those who will witness the last minutes of Curtis Windom's life. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. They will see how he transitions from life to death in just minutes and a fraction of a second. It is from the window where this execution can be seen live. Previously, from this same window, in this same room, sitting in these same chairs, different people, for different reasons, have witnessed the same scene 10 times this year. With this execution, the number of executions from the Florida State Prison reaches no less than 11. Here this afternoon is Curtis Windom's daughter, Curtisia Windom, along with relatives of the executed man and the victims, journalists, and others who voluntarily attended the execution. In this room, they were impatiently waiting for the curtain to open, but with very different interests. Some, like Curtisia Windom's daughter and relatives, hoped the execution would be stopped, hoping that Curtis Windom's execution would be reversed at the last minute. However, others, like Kemeny Hunter, the sister of victim Valerie Davis, longed for Curtis Windom's execution. The journalists only hoped to do their assigned job, as did the prison guard who observed the room. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall in the execution room stood the medical staff, composed of just 3 people who would carry out the execution, according to Florida prison execution protocol, and 1 person assigned to represent Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. The medical staff prepares the instruments that will be used in the execution, checks the doses of the drugs that will be injected into the executed man's bloodstream. Everything is predetermined. Once he enters the execution room, Curtis Windom, 59, takes his last steps. This journey will be the one that will lead him to the end of his existence, and he knows it. Only he knows what thoughts, feelings, memories, or emotions are going through his head in these last minutes of his life. He hears a voice in the distance telling him, "Lie down on the gurney." This is the last instruction and the last voice your ears will hear. His heart beats strongly, perhaps the last instinct for survival, because he is walking to his own execution, to his own death. It is not a voice he has heard before in his life, no. It is not the voice of a loved one, no. He will not have that privilege, because for someone condemned to death, this privilege is not permitted. It's the voice that comes from the medical staff on duty, unaware of him, who are only following a routine protocol and procedure established in an execution program, following the instructions step by step as if they were in a medical intervention. Only this time, it's not about saving a life, but quite the opposite. It's about taking a life. Once Curtis Windom is lying on the execution gurney, the medical staff proceeds to adjust the straps to his arms and the rest of his body. This way, his body is secured to the gurney, immobilized. Curtis Windom watches what is happening around him, hoping for a last-minute miracle, hoping that his daughter's many pleas might stop his death. But nothing happens. Everything continues, like clockwork. The minutes tick by, and he remains lying on the gurney, strapped to the gurney that will hold him firmly until his death. A person never dreams of dying. For most people, death isn't expected. It just arrives. Some are more aware of it than others. For example, you're walking down the street at night, and an out-of-control bus drives past you and hits you. You never saw it coming. Only your body moved a few miles from the initial distance of impact. You die, and the impact against the ground finishes you off. This is very different for a death row inmate. You know exactly the day and time you will die, and you choose the method: lethal injection, nitrogen gas chamber, or firing squad. You can choose that. What exactly does it feel like? Each person will react differently, since we may be similar, but each person, with their own particularities, reacts differently and feels differently. And today is the day of Curtis Windom's execution, as his lawyer had previously informed him. He was sentenced to die for a triple homicide. On the same day, he killed his girlfriend Valerie Davis, mother of Curtis Windom, the mother of his girlfriend Mary Lubin, grandmother of Curtis Windom, and Johnny Lee. That fateful day of the murders was November 7, 1992. This is why he is in the death chamber today and his execution is taking place. Windom's face was obscured by a sheet as the curtain was raised in the death chamber shortly before the execution began. In his last words, Windom said something about being on death row, but it wasn't intelligible. It wasn't understood. Then, with his arms stretched out, they began administering the death injection. It's a mixture of 3 drugs, a sedative, a paralytic, and a drug that stops the heart, according to the State Department of Corrections. As the drugs began to flow, he began to breathe deeply. His gaze drifted across the room, his legs moved several times, and then stopped. They called his name, Curtis Windom, once again, and he was no longer responsive. Curtis Windom was pronounced dead at 6:17 p.m. after a lethal injection. They covered Curtis Windom's face. They closed the curtains over the death window. The people in the room began to leave. Everyone must leave the room. Kemene Hunter, sister of victim Valerie Davis, wore a T-shirt at a press conference after the execution that read, "Justice for her, healing me. All I want to say is it took 33 years to get any closure," Hunter said, adding, "Vengeance is mine, says the Lord." Windom was the 30th person executed in the United States to date in 2025, with Florida leading the way behind a wave of death warrants signed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. Windom received death sentences for the murders and a 22-year sentence for the attempted murder. Davis was the mother of one of Windom's children, a daughter, Curtis Windom, who had campaigned to prevent the execution from taking place. Forgiveness comes with time, and 33 years is a long time. "I myself have forgiven my father," the daughter, Curtis Windom, said in a statement from an anti-death sanctions group that delivered more than 5,000 petition signatures to the governor this week, urging him to intervene. Attorneys for the inmates had filed numerous appeals over the years, including a claim that evidence of their mental health problems should have been introduced at trial. But the Florida Supreme Court ruled that this was prejudicial to Windom because prosecutors had presented evidence that he was a drug dealer and the 2 women he killed were police informants. Many of Windom's appeals had focused on claims that he was represented by an incompetent lawyer when it came to presenting evidence of his mental health. All appeals were rejected,